Good morning and welcome to Sportuccino. It is Friday the 14th of October 2016. It's great to have you with us this morning. We digest sports at breakfast every weekday morning from 8 a.m. So let's begin the show with our morning headlines. Chelsea confirm a new 15-year £900 million kit deal with Nike. Mike Phelan is named Hull's permanent manager. 2012 heptathlon gold medalist Jessica Ennis-Hill retires from athletics. And in the NFL, the San Diego Chargers beat the Denver Broncos 21-13. Well, today's show is brought to you by Barclays Eagle Labs. Barclays Eagle Labs provide co-working spaces and private offices for businesses to create, innovate and to grow. If you'd like to know more about them, all you've got to do is go to labs.uk.barclays. They're also on Twitter at Eagle_Labs. That is today's sponsor of Sportuccino, Barclays Eagle Labs. If you would like to be a sponsor on the show, it's pretty easy. All you've got to do is send us an email to sportsdesk@sportuccino.com. We'd love to have you involved on our morning breakfast show. Well as putting comments in the Facebook page on the comments section on what you think about all things related to sport. Maybe it's some of the headlines, maybe it's some other things you want to get off your chest when it comes to sport. We're also on Twitter at Sportuccino, and every single morning we put up a brand new poll. Let's have a look at today's poll. It is, will Antonio Conte of Chelsea be the next Premier League manager to be sacked? The reason we're bringing this up is because two major bookmakers yesterday, I think it was Paddy Power and Betway, suspended betting on Antonio Conte to be the next Premier League manager to be sacked. Chelsea have called this nonsense and that he is their manager. But what do you think? If they lose at the weekend, could he be the next manager to go? We've already lost Francesco Guidolin at Swansea, been replaced by the American Bob Bradley. So we want to know what you think. Will Antonio Conte of Chelsea be the next Premier League manager to be sacked? Well, let's also have a look at yesterday's poll now. It was, will Rafael Nadal win another Grand Slam title? The reason we brought that up was because he was knocked out in the second round of the Shanghai Masters. He hasn't won a Grand Slam title since 2014, and 73% of you say he won't win another Grand Slam title. Yesterday we had the comedian Stephen Grant on the show. He's a huge tennis fan, and he also didn't think that Nadal would ever win another Grand Slam title. But whether he does or he doesn't, he's been a fantastic player. So 73% of you think he won't win another Grand Slam title. Well, let's look ahead to a big week in the English Premier League. It's Chelsea versus Leicester, the last two Premier League champions. Of course, Chelsea didn't do very well after they won the title. Leicester are struggling this season, have yet to get a point away from home. They travel to Stamford Bridge on Saturday. It's the early kickoff in the English Premier League. Let's have a look at the other fixtures this weekend. So, also on Saturday, it's Arsenal versus Swansea. Bob Bradley's first game in charge of Swansea. Swansea won that fixture last season, 2-1 in fact, at the Emirates. Bournemouth Hull. Hull, of course, as we mentioned in the headlines, have now appointed Mike Phelan as their permanent manager. Chelsea Leicester, we mentioned. Crystal Palace West Ham. Manchester City versus Everton. Of course, Manchester City trying to get back on track after that defeat to Tottenham in the last round of fixtures. Stoke, Sunderland and Tottenham, the team which beat City, they are away at West Brom. And then let's look further ahead in the weekend. Middlesbrough, Watford and Southampton, Burnley are the two games on Sunday. But everyone is talking about the big match on Monday, Liverpool versus Manchester United, one of the really great fixtures in English football. And we're really going to look ahead to that one on Monday. And we're reviewing it with Jamie McLaughlin of the Copite View on Tuesday. So if you've got any thoughts about any of those matches, please let us know in the comments below or let us know on the hashtag Sportuccino on Twitter. Now this summer, 844 professional footballers in England were out of contract. 690 were released, with many never getting another full-time deal. Well, the new Sky Sports Originals documentary, Out of Contract, follows 5 footballers in their search for a club. It's on air on Sky Sports this Sunday from 6:30 and will be available on demand.
I pretty much fell into football and I know I can fall out of it just as quickly.
At the end of the 2015-16 season in England, 844 professional footballers found themselves out of contract.
At the moment, I'm hoping that I do have enough to offer a club.
This programme follows 5 players in their search to stay in football.
Been there basically half my life, and now they're offering me a new contract.
Hopefully I will find a team that will be good for me both on and off the pitch.
It'd be nice to be able to settle somewhere and enjoy playing football.
Well, joining me now on Sportuccino, we've got the documentary maker of Out of Contract, the sports journalist Simon Watts. Simon, welcome to Sportuccino. It's great to have you here this morning. Well, Simon, you follow 5 footballers to find if they can get another job in football. What story touched you the most?
You get to know each of the characters obviously a little bit better than you would do in your normal day-to-day work if you're just turning up at a training ground and interviewing them for 10 minutes and going through the usual kind of motion of questions, really. So it's quite difficult because they all have quite strong stories. I mean, for me, Bradley Pritchard is somebody who I knew before going into the documentary, and he was someone who I'd sort of consulted quite a lot about some of the other players, and he really helped me along the way as well. And when he was released by Leyton Orient in the summer, I don't think any of us really predicted that he just would have had no interest in the way his career would go over the summer, to end up playing part-time football now in October and to have quit the sport altogether. It was probably one of the saddest endings to the stories that we had. From a documentary point of view, I suppose it makes the story stronger. But you know, somebody that I've known from before he even turned into professional football, I think that was probably the most touching one for me. But then, you know, Michael Collins, we followed him in Bangalore back in April, and this is a player who, you know, very experienced lower league footballer. Again, you get to meet him and his family, and you know, his family members through the process as well. He's had rotten luck over the summer. He's still without a club as well, and you know, probably for me, the icing on the cake from the documentary, besides anything that might come off the back of it for me personally, would be if those 2 players in particular, you know, Peter Odemwingie is maybe like the big name in the show, if you like. I think he'll be all right. He hasn't got a club yet, but I don't think he'll be short of offers in the near future. But for those 2 players in particular who really represent what life is like in the lower divisions of English football, I think for me, you know, personally, if those 2 players were to get a club off the back of the documentary and we can help them in a small little way to get to that, then I think that would probably be the best achievement that I've got out of it altogether, really.
Well, as a Brighton fan, I can't believe Bobby Zamora doesn't have a club yet. But let's talk about the younger players for a moment. There's some quite alarming statistics about players which sign for clubs when they're 16 and then they're not even playing again when they're 21, isn't there, Simon?
Yeah, so to break it down, 690 professional footballers were released from their contracts this summer. 844 were out of contracts, so 690 of them, I make that about 19%, end up without a club. Now, heading into the start of the new football season, many of them, hundreds of them, still didn't have a club. In fact, going into September, the statistics we've got suggest that over 200 are still without a club. But as you mentioned, it is the lower, the younger age bracket from the age 16 to age 21. So you're talking about a lot of first year, second year professionals just making their way in the game and just starting out. If they're released from a professional football club, 75% of those players will find themselves out of football, out the football industry altogether by the time they're 21 years of age, which is an alarming statistic, really. And I mean, the one particular player that we chose to follow to represent that age bracket, Emmanuel Sanupe, is a prime example of the real battle that you face to stay in football when you don't have that first team football to your name, because he was training with Tottenham's first team last season, a regular for their under-21 side, England Youth International, Tottenham's academy, one of the best in the country, but let go at the age of 20, and he actually had to go on trial at 6 different clubs before he eventually earned a deal in League One with Northampton Town, which I think sort of proves the struggle that even the players coming from the top academies have to find themselves a club in professional football, let alone players who are released from teams in League One and League Two without any first team experience.
So that's the plight that some of the young players have to go through. But obviously, when people look at the world of football, they think, oh, it's full of money, everyone's loaded. Why should we care if players don't have a club? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think we're all probably guilty of overestimating the glamorous side of football, and I was aware that it wasn't quite like that in the lower divisions when I put the proposal in for the documentary, which was kind of why I did it, really, because myself supporting a team, Oxford, in League One, and watching a lot of lower league football through my work as well, you see the high turnover of players and you hear stories about the unglamorous side of things. And that's really what I wanted to showcase in this documentary. Yeah, we've got the story of Peter Odemwingie, 35-year-old, needs little introduction, and even Marvin Sordell at 25 years of age tasted Premier League football, but we wanted to follow him really because he's had a real rough ride over the last 4 years since being named in the Olympic squad at London 2012. And again, just to highlight, even when you get that big money move when you're a young player, it isn't all a bed of roses, and there can be a lot of things that come off the back of it. I can understand why people might not have empathy with the top players when they've got multi-million pounds in the bank. But really, when you scratch beneath the surface below the Championship and the Premier League, it isn't a level of football that is going to leave you without having to work once your football career is over. You're living on 1 year, 2 year contracts. It's a circus-like lifestyle when you're moving around the country, really. And when you've got a working wife and when you've got a family who want to really have a base and settle down in roots, it's very difficult for a footballer when you're moving around the country maybe 2-3 times a year in the lower divisions as well. All of that really for wages that, okay, they love it because they're being paid to play football. And I think any of us would love to be paid to play football if you're good enough to play football, but it's not as glamorous as it's made out to be. And I'd hope that the documentary at least shows a little bit of that side of the game, which people don't always see and maybe don't always identify with the football that you see on TV day in, day out.
Yeah, I think people don't really think about that, you know, let's say you're a young player growing up in Exeter and then the only club you can get is in Grimsby, and you know that's a long way and you're probably not on that massive wages. You know, those things are difficult. What I'd like to know, Simon, is do you think the PFA are doing enough to help these players?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question because the PFA, we followed them quite closely through the documentary, and they do things like they had a Making the Transition Day that we went to, which is effectively like a jobs workshop for footballers, which they hold about 2-3 times a year. And it's remarkable to look at some of the careers that they've helped players to, you know, go into during their careers. You know, even Bradley, one of our own case studies, had help from the PFA support in getting a degree in law. He's now working for a very well-respected London-based law firm. Michael Collins, one of our players, who suffered a bad injury in the summer, was out of contract, so didn't have a club to train with and do his rehab with, but they paid for that. They paid for his MRI scans and they helped to get him through. So in that respect, they do a lot. I think the biggest problem that PFA face isn't one that they've created themselves, but it's more a problem that the football village, if you like, is one where players think it's going to last forever. And I think it's more a case of changing the mentality of footballers to realise that your football career could end any given day. Just look at Fabrice Muamba and what happened to him at the peak of his career. Circumstances can go against you, injuries, all kinds of things can happen which bring an abrupt end to your career. The resources are there from the PFA to help these players, as we've seen through the documentary. But this particular day that we went to, the Making Transition Day, the jobs workshop with 3,000 PFA members. Okay, it was beginning of June where a lot of them were on holiday, but only 8 players turned up to take advantage of that workshop, which surprised me greatly, really, because, you know, it was a wonderful facility to allow them to look at life beyond football. And I think that's probably the biggest struggle the PFA face. I think they do a very good job, but I think perhaps players within the world of football don't always tap into it as much as they should do.
Now, if you've got any comments or any questions for Simon, please remember to use the Facebook page in the comments section below. We are live on Sportuccino, facebook.com/Sportuccino. We're also on Twitter. Use the hashtag Sportuccino. The Twitter page is at Sportuccino, obviously. Simon, we've already got some comments here. We've got Gary Roll saying he's looking forward to Sunday for the programme. Ben Hickey's asking what time it's on. We'll get to what time it's on again. We spoke about what the PFA are doing, but what about the responsibility of the clubs? Now, when you do have such alarming statistics like 75% from the age of 16, and then by the time they're 21 are out of a club, out of work, should the clubs be providing more services of other type of vocational skills that their players could be learning, or do they do enough for all that?
That's a really interesting question, actually, and one I haven't been asked before. I mean, my take on it is, particularly in that age bracket, we're talking a 75% fallout, 16 to 21. I think academies have drastically improved even in the last decade when it comes to player education. It's not a request, it's an absolute set-in-stone requirement now for all academy players and youth team players to attend classes and look at education alongside their football. But when it comes to the more experienced pros, then I think that's where football becomes a brutal industry. Quite frankly, football clubs don't care what a player is going to be doing outside of football. If they sign a 28, 29-year-old player on a 1, or if they're really lucky in the lower divisions, a 2-year contract, all they care about is what they're going to get out of them in a footballing capacity. And when you look at the turnover of managers in football as well, I mean, just look at Leyton Orient and Charlton Athletic, Bradley Pritchard's 2 most recent clubs, and the high turnover of managers they've had in the last couple of years as well. When a manager comes in, is it really in his interest to have concerns about a player's welfare outside of football when he could be sacked 5 games into a season? I think that's wrong. I think that's very short-sighted, but unfortunately that is the kind of brutal way it seems from the outside looking in that the football industry works at the moment. And certainly in the case of a lot of players who try and get an education outside of football, I wonder whether it actually holds them back a little bit, because the way that managers sometimes think about things, do they look at a player and think, well, okay, if he's studying for this or that and he's going to classes in the evening outside of football, how focused is he on being a professional footballer? Now, in any other industry, you'd be encouraged to look at an education, but I guess it depends on the individual manager. None will admit it, but I do think that sometimes it can make life difficult for you if you're looking at life outside of football. So yeah, I think a lot more could be done by clubs to help players look at life outside of the game, certainly in the latter stages of their career. I think they do a lot for the younger players, but in many ways the most vulnerable now are the more experienced players, because you look at lower league clubs now, for instance, and a Premier League team can loan out a 19-year-old player. A lower league team can pay maybe 10% of their wages, then they're going to take the place of an experienced player's position in that team. And the club are going to go for it because it saves them an experienced player's wage.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that because obviously you do have those demand for results. And, Brighton last season, we loaned James Wilson from Manchester United, and lower league clubs do it as well. And then you look at a team like Chelsea, who I don't know the exact numbers, but they've got something like between 20 and 30 players on loan across the whole world. Now, should perhaps there be caps on development squads and the total number of players you can have at a top club? Because otherwise, all of these teams are just going to be farming out all of their players, and the other long-term professionals in their mid-20s might not be getting clubs, because teams like Chelsea, Arsenal, Manchester United, they want their younger players to get some experience. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole minefield, isn't it? There's this obsession with player development at the moment, with the under-23 squads of Premier League teams being invited into the Football League Trophy this year, which has caused all kinds of problems. And it's actually 37 players that Chelsea got out on loan to various different clubs. I mean, that's like more than 3 starting 11s that you could field, all parent club belonging to Chelsea, and each of those players will probably be sold individually for a couple of million, 5 million here or there. But realistically, how many of those players, unless they're absolutely outstanding, are going to get into their team? And it sounds like I'm picking on Chelsea here, but that is the case with every football club. Look at the case of Oxford, my own team as well. We've got a player on loan from Arsenal at the moment called Dan Crowley, really highly rated young 19-year-old midfielder, but hasn't really played that much football for us since coming on loan. And yeah, player development is important, and obviously you want to get players out there playing first-team football, but that will always come at the expense of a first-team player lower down the food chain. So it does have a knock-on effect. Interestingly, this year, with the loan rules having changed in the Football League as well, Football League clubs this season can't sign players on loan between September and January, which was always the case with Premier League clubs, but you could always sign a 1 month, 2 month loan in the interim period that we're in at the moment if you had an injury crisis in the lower divisions. That has been dispatched this year, so clubs effectively now can only deal in the free transfer market, which coming into the close season, the second month of the season, I did actually think that might help some of the free agents a little bit to find their way back into work. But I mean, ultimately, there are paranoias at every end of football, and I'd like to hope that this documentary exposes that. For the young players, you're always looking and saying, okay, I need first-team experience. If I don't have that first-team experience, then managers aren't going to give me an opportunity, so it becomes a catch-22 situation. Yet the older players are looking and saying, well, hold on, there are these young players who are coming in on loan. They're taking my place in the team. My club's maybe paying a couple of £100 at most towards their wages, where they're seeing it as a cost-saving exercise, but that's effectively costing me my place in the team. So at every level, at both ends of the scale, you've kind of got dilemmas, really. And it's not a new thing. Every year it's a similar number of players who find themselves out of contracts every summer. But that's the brutal way the football industry works. I don't think there's an answer, but it's kind of just a way of showing what the industry is like.
Ben Hickey on the Facebook page, he's asking, Simon, who do you think has the best youth academy in the Premier League?
Best youth academy. I think you look at the recent successes, I'd probably plump for Southampton. You look at some of the players that are already in their first team at the moment, let alone those players that they've managed to sell. I mean, it's all well and good having an academy where, and this is again part of the problem in England when it comes to developing English players, because the top academies now are trawling the entire world to bring in players at the age of 13, 14, sometimes even younger. So, we're talking about foreign players infiltrating the Premier League, and obviously the positive and negative impacts of that. But these players are coming in at a very young age now. What I think Southampton probably deserve a lot of credit for is they've produced a lot of players, and they've actually had the guts to put them in their first team squad at Premier League level and play them. And then, off the back of that, a lot of them now filtering through into the England squad. Well, Tottenham have obviously had success in recent seasons as well. Probably no coincidence that Maurizio Pochettino has had a hand in that at both of those football clubs as well. And you look at the academies of Arsenal and Chelsea, and yeah, they're producing a lot of good young players. I do a lot of work for Chelsea watching their under-18s, and they're a highly talented bunch of players. I'm going to be really interested to see where a lot of those players end up in the coming years, really, because I think you can only gauge an academy's success not with how many young players they produce, but how many actually go on to play first-team football for that particular club.
Well, Ben Hickey's saying not West Ham, but we won't go into that debate. If people want to debate who has the best academy, do it on the Facebook page, do it on the Twitter page. We can discuss this further. Simon, thank you so much for your time this morning. Just before you go, why don't you just give our viewers a reminder of where they can watch Out of Contract?
Yeah, so it's on this Saturday night on Sky Sports 1 at 6:30 in the evening, off the back basically of the Southampton-Burnley game on Sunday. And then if you missed that, I think it's on at 11 o'clock on Monday night and 11 o'clock on Wednesday night as well. And if you miss all of those and you've got a Sky box, then you can also watch it on demand.
Well, I'll definitely check it out. Simon Watts, documentary maker for Out of Contract, the Sky Sports Originals documentary. Thank you so much for your time this morning on Sportuccino.
Thanks for having me. Cheers.
Great to hear from Simon this morning. Just a reminder, today's show is brought to you by Barclays Eagle Labs. Barclays Eagle Labs provide co-working spaces and private offices for businesses to create, innovate and to grow. If you'd like to know more about them, all you've got to do is go to labs.uk.barclays. Follow them on Twitter at Eagle_Labs. That is today's sponsor, Barclays Eagle Labs. All right, one of the big things we need for you to help support this show is to give us a rating and review on iTunes. If you don't know how to do that, I've made a little video for you to learn exactly how. Good morning and welcome to Sportuccino. Well, we like to talk all things health and nutrition and fitness on the show. So I like to give you a little bit of information about some of the top products in the industry. And we've talked about protein bars, protein shakes. We've talked about gluten-free, dairy-free. And today I want to talk to you about an app. It's an app I personally use. It's called Trainerize. Let's have a look at it on the screen here. This is saying how many workouts I've done recently. 53, can't you tell? No, you can't. Look at these puny arms. Never mind. But what it does is you can do it in coordination with your personal trainer. So my personal trainer set up this program for me. So I've got a legs day, I've got a push day, a pull day, a cardio day, and it tells you what you've got to try and achieve each day. So maybe 3 sets of 10 for TRX pull-ups, super planks for 30 seconds, and you can mark everything you want on the app. So, you know, if you do your best 1 kilometer sprint, well, not sprint, you can't sprint 1 kilometer, but your best 1 kilometer run, you can put it in and then you compare next time you go in the gym to how well you did. It's all about the goal setting. What's great about this is if you don't know how to do a specific exercise, you can click on it and it will tell you how you can do it via a video, via YouTube, by one of the top personal trainers. You see there, you've got my personal best there for cardio. Yeah, it was very slow to begin with. It wasn't very good. But it's a really good app. It's really helpful if you want to improve in the gym. Lots of different features, lots of different exercises that you can use. You can also measure your weight and also progress photos. We don't click into that. You don't see me topless of how I looked before and how I look now. No one needs to see that. That will definitely lose us viewers. But it's a really great app. I would definitely recommend it. It's called Trainerize. You can get it on the App Store. I believe it's free. And yeah, have a look. Tell me what you think. If you've got any apps or anything related to health and nutrition that you'd like me to review or that you'd like to recommend to our audience, put in the comments page and put on our Twitter account at Sportuccino. So that is the Trainerize app. And we've nearly ran out of time on this morning's show. Hope you've enjoyed it. Just before we go, let's have a quick reminder of our morning headlines. Chelsea confirm a new 15-year, £900 million kit deal with Nike. Mike Phelan is named Hull's permanent manager. 2012 heptathlon gold medalist Jessica Ennis-Hill retires from athletics. And in the NFL, the San Diego Chargers beat the Denver Broncos 21-13. Wow, 30 minutes flies by when you're having fun, like we do every weekday morning on Sportuccino. We try to cram so much in, but then you get a great guest like Simon Watts talking about his new documentary, Out of Contract, and you just want to ask him more and more questions. Well, we've got more crammed, filled sports breakfast show, Sportuccino, next week. From Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. We will be live on Facebook, facebook.com/Sportuccino. Don't worry, The video will be up there if you miss it live, and you can also listen to us on iTunes. It's another big weekend of sport. Chelsea versus Leicester, probably the biggest game on Saturday. I hope you enjoy that. I hope you have a fantastic weekend, and I'll see you again on Monday morning.